becomes even complicated. You find the contract that are so badly drafted, not by mistake,
Yes.
that will probably say, you will give us 3 more years or 3 albums. And what they do, they give you an opportunity to record 1 album. You're
Yeah.
waiting for the 2 more albums so that you are free, and they don't record. So I always say to my clients who are record label, there is no point in forcing an artist to stay on a contract because your contract says they can stay. If they no longer want to be there.
Artists like to look for public sympathy.
Yes.
So instead of going and
Yeah.
handling business the way it should be handled,
Yeah.
they then go online, they tweet, I can't believe my record label is doing this to me
Yeah.
again. I'm starving, I'm hungry, I can't believe they are, and it's not
people
just...
get angry.
And then the world gets angry. But if we were to ask and look at the merits of the case, we might find that actually the artist signed a contract which they now no longer want to stick to. And instead of going and finding a lawyer like yourself
Yeah.
to say, can we please negotiate
Yeah.
out of this or a
And how
better
do
deal,
we
they
get
go
you-
and they cry for
Yeah.
public
Yeah.
sympathy. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Spotlight with me, your host, Nolu Malope. Today we are shining the spotlight on entertainment law. Why, do you ask? Well, because how is it in 2025 we still have artists complaining that they've signed contracts that don't work in their favor, or that they've went into studio, done a song with an artist and are still not getting paid for their hard-earned work. We're going to find out today who is wrong in these cases. Is it always the label? Is it always management? Or is it that sometimes artists themselves don't understand the business side of the entertainment industry? To unpack this conversation with me today is an attorney who works specifically within publishing and entertainment law. It is my brother, Mr. Dumisani Motsamai. Yay! Tandega nawe. Clap, everybody. Tandega is with us in studio today.
Yes, I'm here today.
Yes, and she's got a mic for the first time.
Yay, can we clap for that?
Clap for the mic. Also, there is someone who commented once on our first episode and said, "Ngale 100 rand besicela ukubona uThandeka."
So first step.
Baby steps.
Baby
She's got a mic. You'll hear the voice. Baby steps.
Yeah.
Now, Bab Dumisani unjani?
Khona sisiba kunjani?
Ngiyaphila.
Well.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Yeah.
You and I are always unpacking cases
No,
and
we are.
situations.
We are. Always are.
Are you comfortable with doing it on camera, on
Yeah,
set?
no, let's do this.
Are you
It's
ready?
about time. Yeah.
It's about time,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And also I know that as someone who works behind the scenes in the industry,
yes.
a lot of the times you don't actually want to be in front of the camera.
Yeah, because I'm not the creative. The creatives are the ones that should be in front.
Yeah.
You must remain. Me and you must remain at the back.
You know what my worry is?
Yeah.
If we remain behind the back, then people don't learn about the industry.
Yeah. Hey. Forever.
The danger is that.
Yeah.
And then there's also misinformation
Yeah.
from...
And they don't know where to find us.
They don't know where to
Yeah.
find you. They don't know you exist.
Yep.
They don't know that there's something called an entertainment lawyer.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Why did you decide to specifically work in entertainment law?
So the story is actually quite complex, and but I'm going to unpack it.
Yes.
My introduction into entertainment law, I think first it was just a love for the music. I love music, I grew up loving music. I remember when I was at university, I used to collect cassettes, and then there was CDs. Okay, I'm revealing my age now.
Yes.
And then there was,
Cassettes. I can count the years now.
then there was, and studying law, and this is actually what people don't know. There is no specific module when you do your LLB where you will study music law or entertainment law for that matter. So you study law like anybody else, and maybe at a later stage, then zoom it. But the question then, that at what point do you then decide that this is what you want to do. So first and foremost, I think for the love for the music always structured me to something entertainment. And as I was studying law, I always knew and I always told myself that I don't want to be an ordinary lawyer. I want to do something that not many people do, especially not many blacks do. And, I used to think of sports law. I used to think of entertainment law. I used to think, I've always thought that I wanted to do that. And then one day, this will shock you.
Yeah.
One day I'm watching, I think it was Summer Awards. And there's an award that's given to one Dr. Rebecca Malope. And she's not there to collect the award. So there's this lady that goes to read her speech.
This is starting to ring a bell. Who comes with the paper to read?
She comes with the paper to read. And as she's reading the speech, I think she was out of the country. It's an acceptance speech. And as she's reading the speech, towards the end, she says, my advice to you, don't sign anything you do not know. And this person reading the speech actually emphasizes that part.
Yes.
And I said, watching that thing planted the seed to say, okay, so you don't sign anything you don't know, but how do you go about knowing what to sign and not to sign? And I was like, that's where I come in.
Okay,
So
that sparked
that was the
seed.
spark. So I owe that lady every single royalty there is to pay from all my income.
That's me. So
Is that
you? That is so beautiful. God works in such incredible, mysterious ways.
Such that when I started, I looked for this Nolu because I wanted that speech so that I can frame it. In particular, I still don't have it, by the way. Maybe after this podcast, I wanted to. If I could get that original one, because I found that profound, especially coming from Mom Rebecca.
Yes.
That had been there for quite a while. I thought that advice coming from her matters.
Yes.
And I really, really thought that's the crux of it all. That's where it stands and it falls. People signing something that they
don't understand.
That they don't understand.
Yeah.
So insofar then as the introduction to eventually do it, I mean, so remember, when you start something, there is always that thing that's at your back of the mind. That happened and was the turning point.
Yes.
For me, that was the turning point.
Yeah.
But I never woke up the following day and became the entertainment lawyer.
Yeah.
But I always knew from that speech that if the industry is to be assisted, there is somewhere where people should be able to go and verify things before they sign them.
Yes.
I knew I was a lawyer, but I knew back then that if they were to come to me the following day, I don't know what to say to them because I'm not clued up. I know how a contract looks like, but if someone is to come to me with a music contract, I probably wouldn't know what to say to them. So I worked as a commercial lawyer. I then, as part of that, I found myself in a corporate environment, and I found myself working in a town called Vanderbijl Park in the Vaal, and I was working for a company there. It's a steel manufacturing company, and I used to drive back to Pretoria for church, and but at times the driving became a problem. Then I found myself joining a church. Through a mutual friend. And the church coincidentally belonged to a recording artist. The pastor was a recording artist. A guy called Israel Musetla. Pastor Israel Musetla was the late great Israel Musetla. So we struggled. With Israel, really, I think it was a destined a relationship and association, because we struck a friendship almost immediately. And before I knew it, I was accompanying Israel to gigs. And before I knew it, as we go to the gig, Israel was starting to share the industry, and I was starting to learn basic things, I got to know what is a tech rider. I got to know what is a call time. I used to get to know what is a stage time. I got to know all this. So for me, I'm just accompanying my pastor to church. But before you know it, I am actually preparing the microphone for him before he sings. I'm actually making sure that he has his water. And I'm like, I could do this. I think I'm loving this. This is something that before I knew it, his bookings, the calls were coming on my phone. And I didn't even know that I'm now handling his
manager or booking agent. And
the good thing about Israel, I really, really, and I'm glad I said this to Israel himself when he was alive. he was so patient in teaching me these things. So he will tell people that if you want to book me, call this number.
Yeah.
And as the person calls, Israel is next to me. He's actually, his lips are telling me what I must say to
like
the person.
this is what you must ask.
This is what,
the conversation must cover.
You know.
Yeah.
So he helps me prepare, you know, the inquiry form when you booked and all
Yes.
that. And before I knew it, I'm actually working as this guy's business affairs manager. Before I was even aware that we travel a lot, and that's the guy really that helped me a lot. To be quite honest, to realize from that speech that Nolu made in receiving an award, to actually practicalize it, to say, at what stage then do you get to add value into an artist's career?
Yes,
So, and how does Israel do that? Israel do that by teaching me the basics of the industry. As I say, you know, I get to know about the different contracts that are there. So Israel says, "You the lawyer, right?" I said, yeah. That time I'm a lawyer, but I've never seen any contract music related.
Any music contracts, yes.
And I remember very, very well, there's a song that needed to be sampled, not really sampled. They wanted to include one of his songs in a compilation by Tamingubeni. It's a compilation that Sony was doing for Tamingubeni, and they wanted to put the song "Fill My Cup." I'm sure you remember the song "Fill My Cup." And so the licensing agreement gets sent to us, and Israel is like, "Oh, you the lawyer, have a look at it." Like,
You've never seen a licensing
I've never seen a
agreement before.
I've never seen a music law contract, let alone a licensing agreement. And I always tell Ubaba Usibisi, advocate, that our contract was from you, because he was the business affairs at Sony at the time. So the first ever contract I had to look at was that. And at the time I have no clue. Now, what does Israel do? Israel says, I might not know the legal terminology in a contract, but I know when they talk about this and this within an industry term.
Yeah.
So as times go on, then when Israel needs to sign an artist into his record label, Harbor Music Production, he will find a contract, he will find a template and say, let's use this template. So I'll come in with because I've studied law, I know what we mean when we talk about a period, when we talk about a term, when you talk about termination. But I don't know what we mean when you talk about a recording commitment. I don't know when you talk about a royalty split.
Royalties,
I don't know what you mean when you talk about an option.
Yes.
But Israel comes in there. And he explains it in a manner that then makes sense, you know. And that's how, really, to be honest, that's how I got to have my baby steps in this whole thing. So I started then working with him, largely within a business affairs environment. But as times went on, I then assisted him more on the legal advisory. But the important thing is that I didn't start off as just in the legal. I started off more in the management side of things. And that helped a lot, because then I understood most of the issues that forms the crux of this agreement. Because you can't tell me about frustration of an artist because he can't get on stage on time. I know it.
You
can't tell me about frustration of an artist because the rider is not
provided.
It's not provided. So all those kind of things then assisted me to understand the light. Because with law, Nolu, any lawyer, whether you're a mining lawyer or an environmental lawyer, if you don't understand the industry, you won't add any value. So what working with Israel as a business affairs helped me with was to understand the industry. The rest, really, it was a question of you now learning in the road. So to answer your question, there is not one module I did during the LLB. It was just being afforded the opportunity to manage an artist and work as a business affairs. Once I was there, then I attended, there's a school in Auckland Park. It's called the School of it's the Academy of Sound Engineering. They have a 1-year course there for music business. I attended that. That helped a lot. I also read a couple of books. And in fact, one of the books that I read was a book by Nick Matsukis, and Nick Matsukis is actually the facilitator of that school. You know, and it helped. Quite, and a couple of other books. That we were able to read, but. In the main, it was being in it. As I say, the first ever agreement that I saw, I knew nothing what's going on. But through understanding the industry, then these things start making sense. You draft agreements at first, with not that understanding. But as times go on,
You start to understand.
You start to understand.
Yeah.
But you don't tell clients that, you know what, you are my guinea pig for now. You know, I will learn. You never do
I'll
that.
learn on the job.
Yeah, I'll learn on the job. No, you never
Yeah.
do that. So we started that. That was back in 2015. You know, I had told myself that I will never, ever open my own law firm. You know, I'm fine being in corporate. But you know, I always say music, Nolu, and you should know this better. You're born in the music environment. Music, ufana no bizo, man. You know,
Yeah.
I always feel pity for parents who are frustrated about their kids who don't sleep and they're making beats the whole night and they wish they were studying maths and science. You know, music, mangabe bambi look bambi. You
Yes,
know,
true.
once you are in this, if you are in love with music, and it becomes difficult to divorce yourself easily with it. So I was in a cushy corporate job. You know, I was fine. I was not paid all the money, but I was fine. I was
Yeah,
okay. I was comfortable. But when the time came, I decided, you know what, I wanna focus on this full time now. And I have
And
to.
at that time you made that decision, you're deciding, I'm going to focus on not just law full time,
Yes.
but entertainment.
Entertainment law. I decided, and then I want
Yeah.
to. Hey, which made my dad not so very happy. Hey, I doubt if he is now. In fact, I remember at some point in time, he was asking Mom Sipo Makabane. You know, he didn't know I'm hearing the
Yeah.
conversation. He was like, Usamumeli Dumisani.
Because now you're traveling with
Yeah, because I
artists.
travel a lot. So
Yeah.
my company is saying, why? I said, no, it's always carrying your bags. You know, that's all it is. And you know, my father thought he's raising a lawyer. And here is this guy that's always with artists and behind the
artists,
scene.
yeah.
But what my father didn't know is that this is where I'd rather be.
This is where your passion
No,
is now.
this-
I want to ask you
Yeah.
this. So now you work with Ubab Israel Moses.
Yes.
You learn, you get a
I
crash
learn.
course in
I
what
get
the
a crash
entertainment
course. Yes,
industry is,
yes.
what the issues are.
Yes.
What
yes.
contract some lawyer wrote from a record label.
Usu-
Who
upu-
does?
I always tease him when I
Yeah.
see him. Who advocates Smith and Clanter Smith.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. You know, you start to understand now
Yeah.
because you're not on record label side, you're on artist side. You start to see the loopholes and the issues within those very same
Yes,
contracts
yes.
that are written by other advocates that don't necessarily always serve the artist.
Yes, yeah.
What are some of the issues that you saw as you were working with Ubab Israel Musetla
Yeah.
that made you decide we really need entertainment law to be taken seriously? What are some of the issues you came across?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. You know, and one of the main thing I picked, Nolo, was that contracts in the entertainment law space, and not just music law,
Yeah.
are written in a complex language.
Yeah.
Here is me. I see you relating.
I know.
I've already been a lawyer for over 10 years at the time. This is about 20. I mean, I got admitted as a lawyer in 2001. This is now 20. I get introduced to this thing in 2015 already. 2014, 2015. So you can imagine I've been a lawyer, commercial lawyer for that matter. You know, I'm not just doing bails and
Yeah.
divorces. I'm a commercial, I'm drafting agreements, I'm reviewing agreements.
Complicated agreements
Complicated
still.
agreements, you
Yeah.
know. And I'm seeing this agreement for the first time, and the language doesn't make sense. Now imagine a young boy from Matatiele. I don't know why I keep making it because one of my clients is from
I think so.
Matatiele.
I was going to say, do you have a client from Matatiele? Because
Yeah, imagine this.
but it's
young-
true. A lot
yeah.
of the times, it's people that come
Yes.
from rural
Coming- yeah,
areas
coming
with
to-
raw talent,
raw
who
talent.
have never seen a contract before.
Yep.
Never mind the
Yep.
type of language that is being used
Yes,
in
yes,
business.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. Never seen this. So so the first challenge to answer your question is that contracts are not drafted in the music business, at least, and I believe the same even with acting.
Yeah.
They're not drafted in a manner that is simple and basic English. In fact, I was reading one tweet from who is this guy that's accused of not being right upstairs? Who is rich? Kanye West.
Oh, Kanye.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
how did she just know? The guy accused of not being right.
Yeah,
Oh, it has to be
I don't know why
Kanye.
that- He was saying one of the things that need to be sorted in the music industry is get rid of the lawyers or get them to write the contract in simple, basic English. Honestly speaking, why must you talk about the anniversary of a contract instead of saying when the contract expires?
Yeah.
Because the second one is much more straight.
It's straightforward,
So
yeah.
it's drafted, and the contracts are drafted in such a way that they are not easy to follow, number
Yeah.
one. But secondly, even where you don't understand, and I like the example that you made, here is this kid that comes and is desperate for a breakthrough. He's given the contract. For them, getting the contract is their achievement.
Yes.
There's no way they're going to go and look for a lawyer that's going to come and say, don't sign. They want to sign.
They're hungry
so
to
they're
sign.
hungry to sign.
Yeah.
They're hungry to succeed. So
Yes.
so the contract signing thing then just becomes a formality. Because what they do, they take the contract, and the guys who will give you a contract will say, find a lawyer.
Yeah.
And half the time you will find a lawyer who knows the contract, but he will just be like Dumisani in 2014 and not understand much, on the contract.
About what these terms are going to mean
Exactly.
when it matters most,
When it matters
which is
most, when
later
the time-
on.
Yes. And it has been said all over again that a person that drafts a contract and give it to someone else will not be stupid to give someone a contract that doesn't favor them.
No.
Or that's negative towards them.
No.
They
wouldn't be in that business.
No,
they wouldn't
they
be such
wouldn't
a
be that-
successful
Yeah.
record label
Yeah.
if they didn't
Yeah.
draft contracts
Exactly.
that were working in their
Exactly.
favor.
That working in their favor.
Yeah.
So the West then, a challenge that I found, if I were to answer your question that way, is that clients will find it difficult to understand the contract, but that's not the end of the problem. The contracts are drafted in such a way that they are complex, and you are hearing this from someone who read the first music contract when he had already been a lawyer for 10 years, but
Yes.
still didn't understand it.
Yeah, yeah.
But now these young artists who are hungry for fame get the contract, and they are told that you can ask your parent or you can ask another lawyer.
Like,
and
you're
they
free
don't-
to go and consult.
Yeah.
And it's standard. Everyone always says it's standard. It's a
In
standard
fact, now
contract.
it even has a clause that says you warrant and undertake that you got legal advice, so that you don't come later on
And
and
say,
say you were for.
Yeah.
But the reality of the matter that they never understood the contract. But even if they understood, no, let's say they found a lawyer who was able to point
Yes.
out the issues, to say, you know what, I have a problem with this. For example, you asked me a good question to say, what are some of the clauses that, for example, you'll have a contract that says you must give us 3 albums, but we have an option to require that you give us 3 more albums.
Yeah.
You thought this thing was for 3 albums, actually for 6.
Yes. And now you want out because
now
now
you
you've
want
made
out.
it.
Now you are told that before you leave, you were. I'm tempted to give a case that before
No,
you
but
leave.
I think it's important to break it down
Yeah.
because I feel sometimes
Yeah.
this is what the conversation that misses a lot of people. You know?
Yeah.
We hear all the time artists, even now, still complaining about the very same thing you're
Yes,
talking
yeah,
about. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
no, now I want
Now I want out.
Now I want out. And
And-
this contract was signed recently in these times where we live in the information age, where there's a lot of lawyers coming out and speaking about these issues, but something is still going over our heads.
Yeah,
There's something
yeah.
we're still missing, and that's why I think it is important to break
Case
it down,
studies,
to
yeah,
say,
yeah.
okay, you
Yeah.
signed the contract, you
Yeah.
came from Atatiela, wafika laphana Rose
Yeah.
Bank, you signed a contract.
Yes.
Mawufika laphana bathi with an option to renew
Yeah.
for 3 more years,
Yeah.
and the ownership of your music is also in
Yeah.
perpetuity.
Yes,
and
yes,
and there's
yeah.
all these terms, and
Yeah.
you're thinking, no, I can do the 3 albums. They're even offering me an advance, so I'm
Yes.
going to have
Eish.
cash in my pocket.
That A word.
You know, and I want us to break it down. What is the problem with some of these things that get artists excited? You know,
Yeah, get
3
us-
years,
yeah.
and you've got an advance.
Yeah.
And at this moment, it doesn't matter in your head because you have nothing.
Yes.
You have
Oh, yes.
nothing today.
Yes.
So why wouldn't you just sign something
Yes,
that
yes.
gives you a guarantee?
Changes your life,
But
yeah.
then 3 years later, you've made it. And you're supposed to be making more money than you've signed up
Yes.
for. And now you want out. Now you can be independent. Now you can afford to stand on your own 2
Yeah.
feet. And they say, oh, sorry. This clause number 15.3
It provides for an option.
C
Yes,
says
yes.
we've got the option, and
Yes.
we choose to keep you
We
on for
choose to
another
keep
3
you
more
for another
years.
3 years.
Yeah.
3 years or 3 albums.
Or 3
depending
albums.
on what
Yes,
comes later.
yes.
And it becomes even complicated. You find the contract that are so badly drafted, not by mistake,
Yes.
that will probably say, you will give us 3 more years or 3 albums. And what they do, they give you an opportunity to record 1 album. You're
Yeah.
waiting for the 2 more albums so that you are free, and they don't record you.
Yes, and they keep you
They keep
locked.
You.
Yes,
because effectively you still owe them 2 more albums,
Yeah.
but they're not enabling you to record those 2 more albums. So you're stuck with
yes.
that.
So
contract.
explain for an artist that's listening, number one, and
Yeah.
also for the audience members that are always reading these. We read these stories every
All
week.
the time,
Nje.
yeah.
There's an artist saying, "I
Yeah.
want out," and
Yeah.
they don't want to let me out. The
Yeah.
same thing you're talking
Yeah.
about now. Where it's
Yeah.
like I've done everything they said, but they still won't let me go free. Right?
Yes.
Explain to them. At that signing stage, what are those clauses that you need to look out
So,
for?
so that option clause is always a problematic, in the sense that the clause, for instance, will read, overall, we call it the recording commitment. In other words, as an artist, what are you committing to record here?
Yeah.
We are committing to provide the studio facility. We are signing you. So we are committing that, for example, we will give 3 albums. And nowadays, it will probably be an EP. Give 3 EPs within a period of, say, 3 years, to make it simple. I was not very good with math at school, so I must keep this thing simple. So 3 years, it means, per 12 months, it's an EP, it's an EP, it's an EP.
Yeah.
Then it has a clause that the record label will retain an option to renew this contract for 3 more years or 3 albums, whichever comes early. And then they will, once they say the record label has an option, it basically means this thing is effectively 3 plus 3.
Yeah.
So it's 6 years.
Yes.
Only the company can make it less.
Can cut it. Because
Yeah,
I
can
think
cut
sometimes
it.
people
Yeah.
think
They can give notice.
You too have an
No,
option. It's like the
unless
record label has an option and you feel like you have an
A
option
record
to
label
get
will
out.
never give you a contract that says that, no. You know why?
Yeah.
Because the purpose of the option says, we will record Nolu for the first album. It will be an introductory album. People still don't know her much.
Yeah.
The second one, we have marketed her and people will start be knowing her. We have not recouped our money.
The most
for
important part, yes.
Yeah,
They want to recoup
They want to recoup their money. They want
yes.
to break even.
Yes.
So there's no way they will let you drop 3 albums when you're out your peak, you go.
Yes.
For another record label that will catch you when you're already
and benefit from their hard investment.
No.
Because they did take you from a
Oh,
and
they did.
invest in you for those 3 years.
That thing will get me in trouble after this interview.
No, our case study artist is from Matatiele. It's done. So they did take you when you had nothing. They to be fair, because sometimes we blame the record labels, but to
Yeah.
be fair, they did take you when you had nothing. They saw your talent. They invested in you. They want to make their money back.
Yeah.
Is it unfair?
Well, I always say when it comes to the question that is, it's not, when you start a record label, it's a business investment. Anyway, where it becomes a problem, Nola, I will tell you. And I've actually written articles about this. There is nothing wrong with a record label signing artists for the purposes of them making money and the artists helping them realize where the problem starts is where the accounting for the income end becomes an issue.
Yeah.
I'll tell you where the mistake starts. The mistake starts in the record label not being fully transparent about the income that has been earned.
Yeah.
I will tell you where the problem gets complicated. The problems get complicated when the record labels start dispensing some finances towards the artist and not necessarily recording them. So that when the money starts coming in, you say, what are you talking about? Because I'm paying your rent.
Yes.
What are you talking about? Because I bought you a car. What are you talking? And that's where the problem starts. If you can be able to keep to the latter of the agreement. What is the latter of the agreement? We agree that I sign you, you give me music. Let's go back to my example. For 3 years, 1 album or an EP per year, and we agree on a royalty that, because I own the master, the law is very clear.
Yeah.
And my Borisa says this all the time, master tag. If you record,
Yeah.
whoever spends money for the recording or facilitate the recording owns the master. There's nothing wrong. But the same law, Copyright Act, says you have a reciprocal responsibility to pay royalties now. You own the master, yes, but the people that sing on the master, whose recording is embodied on the master, must be paid a royalty.
Yes.
So the problem starts when? It starts in when the money comes in from the distributors, your whatever company that is distributing for you. It comes in, you now no longer pay this 15% or 20% or 25% in accordance with your agreement. And the reason you are not paying it, and at times, it's not because you are being greedy.
Yes.
But it's because we are saying, this guy ufiela with nothing.
Yeah.
I put him in a car, I put him on a hotel, but you are not recording all these expenses. You are assuming now that when this 1 million comes, number one, it must balance you for all the money that you have spent. So you are not being transparent to the artist to say, Virgin Music or Electromode or whoever I'm distributing with has given me a check for you. I now have 100,000. I've already spent 20,000. Here's 80,000. That doesn't happen. The conversation.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you where they then also gets complicated now. you find that, in the olden days of CDs, you could have a situation where you only have a recording agreement. But in our days, a recording agreement goes with a management agreement and possibly even a publishing agreement, what with the so-called 360 deal,
Yes.
for everything. So what most record labels do, they don't pay the royalty for the music streaming part. Instead, they pay you your gig fees. You go and gig, they take 20%, others 30, others 50. And when you say, guys, Imali for my music, they say, what are you talking about? Because we pay you every week. I'm not talking about that money. That money belongs to a different contract altogether. That's the bookings.
Yeah.
That's management. I'm talking from the money coming from the sale. So the issue, Nolu, comes from poor accountability and poor payment. And one of the things that causes poor accountability and poor payment from record labels are two things, you'll be shocked. One of them is the fact that they spend a lot of money out of their pocket. An artist now and again calls, the child needs Pampers.
Yeah.
The artist, the record label pays. The child calls and says, hey man,
I'm behind on rent.
I'm behind on rent. Oh, my feel, and you forgot what happened last month. But and now and again the record label comes in. So the record label is like, but this is like my baby now. I've spent so much.
The wires get crossed.
The wires get crossed. So
wrong.
I've paid so much money such that when the money comes, I want to recoup first. But because you are not recording these monies, we don't know where is the level of the recouping.
So for that point exactly.
Yeah.
Because, of course, the label, it's their business model. They must make money from recording you. So to be fair, we're going to find this middle ground where it's fair is fair for everyone, because we can't just always blame the labels.
Not
we
true.
can't
I
always
agree.
blame the artist too. Fair is fair is fine, you signed, you've got the recording deal. Maybe you've even signed the 360, they do management, they do everything. Make sure that accounting is clear.
Yes.
If you're asking for your rent money and you haven't been paid, you didn't have a gig this month and the royalties haven't come in, it must be written down that they paid your rent.
Yeah.
It must be written down that
And
they
it's
paid
an
for your car.
advance. Yes.
And it comes and it forms part of your advance from your label. Meaning, when it's time later on, when you start making your money, they need to recuperate that.
They must
meaning,
reconcile,
at the point where the contract is now at its end and it's time for them to look at their option, if they say, but as you can see, according to the accounting and all the money that you still owe us, we have not made this back. So you need to stay with us again for another,
so that we can
so we can make our money back.
So that this become a fair investment.
Yes, wouldn't that just be straightforward if the communication was clear?
So I say to you, there is two problems with that tends to happen. The first one is exactly the one you are suggesting a solution for, to say you must record. But the second problem that happens, and many people don't know about this.
Yes.
When I have 5 artists signed in my record labels, and I have 5 albums for these artists, they are all plugged with a distributor, say Africori for that matter. When Africori pays me every month, they pay me for the streams of all these 5 artists.
Yes.
How do I pay Nolu?
But they pay you with a statement stating that this is for artist A, artist B, artist C. This is this
you
song.
can ask for that.
They give you statements.
You can give you assessment. But you must still have your own accountant that's able to break it down.
Yes.
Because they will pay you per catalog. The statement will speak to catalog.
Yes.
But of course you can be able to break it down. Yes. But most record labels don't want to invest in that extra. And as a result, and we've seen this from litigation cases we have done where we were looking especially at royalties that goes way back, where someone will say, I do want to pay you, but that year you are talking about, I received 2 million. But it was not just for this artist you are now talking to me about. It was for this and this. How do we then go back?
And that's mismanagement on the label
side. That's mismanagement on the side. So on top of the suggestion that you have said, what will help is for record label to invest in systems that allow for royalties to be broken down to a cent. So that I know that when I receive from the distributor a big check, how do I break it down to an artist and break it down to a particular album or a song of that particular artist?
The distribution platforms that exist, they actually do have...
No, they do.
Clear statements that say your song, track number 1.
Yes, you can be able to.
These are the number of streams, So I think it has a lot to do with then mismanagement on the side of the labels. This one part has to do with that, because that means they receive monies and then they just go by their own feelings.
Yeah,
Okay,
no.
now I think I deserve to have this much, and I'm only going to pay the artist this
Ngoba
much.
kade ngikhokha.
Ngoba kade
Yeah,
ngikhokha, which is
yeah.
why the artists must have accountants
Yeah.
and lawyers, and the record labels also
Yes,
must have their
yes,
own accountants.
yes.
I want us to talk about some cases that you've dealt with, because this is where it gets meaty and juicy.
Yeah. So
This is where it gets juicy. First of all,
Yeah.
have you ever had this situation? Because our artist from Matatele comes, records 3
Why
years
must
later.
you keep going? You get me in trouble, guys. No,
Okay,
man.
let's pick.
Let's call him
Ufumazi.
from
Give me
Mlazi.
Mlazi. Okay,
Just I have another client from
Oh.
Mlazi. Tell them what?
Ekwakwa, guys.
Ekwakwa, okay.
Thank you. Let's get it.
Okay, let's leave Matatele alone. You've got the
You know, the
artist.
reason I want to leave Matatele is because coincidentally, I do have a client from Matatele, and I do have an ongoing case involving them. So,
Okay, you don't have to mention who they are.
There's a new one from Kwakwa.
Okay,
guys.
let's
Go
pretend
with
there's a
that
new one from
Yeah,
Kwakwa, you know,
yeah.
and you can say names if you want to, but
Okay,
we also
okay.
respect your confidentiality
Sure,
that
sure.
you have with your clients, so
Sure.
we don't expect you to
No,
out
that's all.
them, you know.
Yeah.
But artists from Kwakwa came, recorded, had nothing. 3 years later, they are a big star.
Yeah.
They are singing.
Papopile.
They Papo Pile
Yeah.
Murtu, as people
Yeah.
would say. You know,
Yeah.
they are the star,
Yeah.
okay, of the show. Now they feel they want to go independent at that current stage.
Yeah.
Record label says no. Not on our dime. You still owe us an
Yes.
album or 2 or 3,
Yes.
and we have the option. You signed this 3 years
Yeah,
ago
yeah.
when you had nothing.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to take an artist out of a deal like that? And what ways can you help an artist that is in that situation that says, no, I actually want out. I don't want to give them the
Yeah,
option.
I-
What are the options
I have.
available?
It
Yeah.
happens. It happens. You know, and it's actually very, very funny. Half the time when it happens, when an artist is still knocking in everyone, and I want to go to your point that you raised earlier to say, you know, not all record labels are evil. You know, a record label takes the risk of believing in an artist which not many people believed in. And you find that that artist has been knocking in other doors. And in fact, I hear the story, this is now public knowledge, so I can talk about it, that when Zahara blew,
Yeah.
there is another record label boss at the time was big enough who had Zahara's demo in his cabin wall for a while. And it's like, I'm going to listen to this thing. I never got to listen to it.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying that many artists, at the time that they come to a label that believes in them and gives them a chance, they've been trying other doors and it hasn't worked. And yet when the artist has done 1 or 2 albums and they are now big, the same labels start to come and whisper to say, no, but these people are
I
not.
can give you a better deal.
I can be, you know, do they pay your publishing? Do they pay? See,
even
they're not
know?
paying.
You don't even know.
Yeah, you don't even know about this gig. You know, how much do
Yeah.
they pay you for your gigs? You know,
Yes.
how do you get to the gigs? You know, do you have your own piano?
manager,
You know,
yeah.
to pay. You know, so when artists reach that state, it's because there is now more voices, you know, that are now talking. Other voices come from the family itself. You know, you'll find that a sister that will never be even take care of your career or care about your career, suddenly, you know, has an interest and is the one that wants to make sure that. So there's many influences that happen, you know.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when an artist get to that level, it's because there's many people that see an opportunity also to be involved, you know, at that particular level.
And to benefit.
And to benefit.
And
unfortunately.
to some extent, unduly benefit because they
you
didn't
know.
do the initial
No,
investment.
they didn't do it. In fact, when you were still hustling on your own, they were not even supporting
not
them,
interested, yeah.
But to answer your question correctly, you know, when an artist says, lento ye artist and a record label relationship, it's a relationship of partners, is a relationship. If someone says, I don't want to do this anymore, they don't want, you know.
Ungathi but sishadile, we
You
fight.
know,
We said till death do us part. I said I
that's
don't
why
want.
I suggest in the vows we should say until death or divorce. You know,
Death or divorce. Yeah.
divorce situation.
Yes.
So when an artist say I no longer want to release
be in
music for
this
this record label,
agreement, yeah.
there is no point in forcing them, for the simple reason that music is I must be in the mentally and emotionally, I must be ready to the creative juices to flow.
Yeah, and
when I go to the
artists
studio.
are creative.
Yeah,
they
they're
work with their
creative.
hearts,
Exactly,
their
their hearts,
souls.
yeah. It must
If
be-
inhlitiyo ibuhlungu,
Yeah, no, he's not
abakhona
gonna give it.
ukusebenza.
Yeah. He will do it, but you could, and the fans could pick that. You know what?
Get right.
Get
Yeah.
right. It was
Yeah.
not. So I always say to my clients who are record label, there is no point in forcing an artist to stay on a contract because the contract says they can stay. If they no longer want to be there, in fact, the first thing that they will do, apart from refusing to record or recording something that is below par, they'll start taking their own gigs.
On the side.
Yeah, on the side. You will know about gigs that have happened. They think it's a secret, but people are too excited. They do selfies and they do live and all.
In the social media world, you can't hide it anymore.
Yeah. And once an artist gets to that stage, really, you must know that the glass has cracked. And you need to find a way then of saying, how do we terminate this relationship, but terminate it in a manner where I don't lose out, I've already lost out in the sense that I had invested in this act and I thought I'll make money going forward. But how do I now be at least break even? And one of the options that are there, I'm probably giving free legal advice now, is that you can go for what we call an override. In other words, it's fine, Nolu. You can go to Thandeka's record label, and Thandeka does look like someone who can steal artists. You can go to Thandeka's record label, but because you still owed me 2 more albums, for the 2 more albums that you will do there, I want a particular percentage. We call that an override, So for a certain period of time, for the music that is there, even though that record label will still benefit, but I also want to benefit in order to compensate me. So I can then give you an early release on that basis. Or you can go there, but from your bookings now, I now want a percentage until maybe we agree a particular period of time or until a particular amount of money has been paid off. And the only problem with this thing becomes honesty. Remember, this artist is now more cozier to that other guy than this one. So they might collude with that one and say, we made 100 rand, even though they made 500 rand. And when you want 50% of 100 rand, it becomes 50 rand instead of 50% of 500 to 250. But I'm just to answer your question, an override is one of the other options that are there if someone wants to leave it. Because I always say, if you come to me, for example, to advise and say, Dumisani, I'm a record label owner, I've signed Nolu, she wants to leave, can you help me keep her to a contract? I will advise you, don't do it.
Yeah.
Because you are not going to get the best out of her in that sense. Release them. And once you've released them, you can then negotiate an override and let's see to what extent you can be able. Music business is a very risky business to invest in. You put in a lot of money. And artists will still leave when they feel like they want to leave. And by the way, there's many reasons for artists to leave. I've had an artist walk into my office and wants to be cleared from the contract, and when I want to find out what's wrong with your current, I'm not. Someone else has told him, and this guy has tried to account, and you know what? There is really no reason why this person and also there is also this misnomer that is there amongst artists, and I must raise up my hand. I was one of those in the beginning of my career that contributed into this misnomer. Not every artist can be a good independent artist.
I think, to be honest, most artists are not good independent
artists. I've learned
artists.
that in the twilight of my career.
Yes.
When I started, I wanted to clear everyone.
Because there was a wave. There was a wave where we were all told that now that there are more systems available, you can actually release your music independently. You can be the one negotiating deals. But one thing about artists, they are honestly 90% of them are not good with business. They are artistic minds and they are brilliant at that.
Give them the mic.
Give them the mic. But this is why we advocate for, even if you're an independent artist, you need to run like a business. You cannot be running. You cannot be a spaza shop. You need to run like a business, just the same way as the record label has staff. You too must have a lawyer, an accountant, the business manager.
Someone that does your PR.
Somebody that's doing your PR. Somebody that's doing admin, because artists are bad with admin as well.
And you basic admin, like keeping a receipt after McDonald's coming from a gig.
Holding you accountable as well to the decisions you make, and making sure that you are running yourself as a business, yourself as an artist as a business, but also if you're going to start a label, run the label as a business. It's a business. It's not. It is a business. It's not a spaza shop thing, So, it is a business. So, back to your point, there are options.
There are options
that artists can be able to negotiate. They must just find a lawyer, and maybe because a lot of the times now, what artists like to do, and maybe I'm being a bit dramatic, but this is how I feel. Artists like to look for public sympathy.
Yes.
So instead of going and handling business the way it should be handled, they then go online they tweet, I can't believe my record label is doing this to me again. I'm starving, I'm hungry, I can't believe they are, and it's not
people
just
get angry.
And then the world gets angry. But if we were to ask and look at the merits of the case, we might find that actually the artist signed a contract which they now no longer want to stick to. And instead of going and finding a lawyer like yourself to say, can we please negotiate out of this or a better deal, they go and they cry for public sympathy.
Yeah, because otherwise, and when you do that, you are hoping then that the cancel culture will kick in.
Which is what they do.
The
they
record
bully.
label,
the audience then bullies the record labels into releasing the artists.
Then get really, and in all fairness to record labels, really, at times the investment that has gone into making that artist, they don't want to let go at the time.
Yeah.
So even this example I'm giving you, there's options of how to clear. At times, other record labels don't even want to do that either, because they're like, even if I'm to do an override, I will need a lifetime to recover what I've spent on this particular art. And some of them, you'll find that they had developed a personal relationship with the person. This was like a daughter, this was like a son. I wanted to see, I want to build my own record label on Nolu. And now Nolu is going to leave and goes to Tandega, and I'm really, really not happy with that, because now I must start afresh and groom another Nolu.
And my heart is just broken.
My heart is just broken.
And
if I'm frustrated, me now there is a part that says, and really, it's the truth of the matter is that you can't hold an artist. If an artist feels that I want to leave, then they want to leave. You really need to do one of two things. Either do these options of override or whatever. And if you can get an override on gig fees, booking fees, that's even higher, because with the streams, there's very, very little you can get recouping on streams. But you might, if for example, the artist gets booked for 50, 100,000, if you do an override on that, you might quickly. But if we to the first one we speak about of not recording your expenses. Because you might say, I don't want to let go of the artist, I've invested a lot. And if we can ask you how much?
Give us a figure.
Give us a figure, because maybe the new record label might want to
buy out. Because there's an option
that's the other option.
Where
actually,
if Tandega comes and says, I'm another record label and I want this artist, and the artist agrees and buys into whatever they're
like
selling.
They do it in football.
Let's buy you out. What's the investment?
What's the investment? How much? But we don't record. At times we don't record because the relationship has been so much. I mean, now and again the artist calls Ufuni airtime. Now he calls.
You record.
You don't record every single.
Recorder le airtime. Recorder le
in fact, that should be the moral of the story of this podcast.
The moral of the story is record all the expenses.
So that if a person says he's living, with what
this is how much they must recuperate. And even as an artist, you yourself record it. So that you also not bamboo-zled tomorrow when you want out and the person says, no, you owe me millions. You can say, here are the amounts, here are the advances you gave me. There is nothing outside of this, and left. You know what I mean? So here's how much I can buy myself out, or the new label will buy you out, or whatever the deal is, so that you can release me. And then that way it's still, the business is still run like a business, because what happens is that it becomes like the music industry is a Mickey Mouse operation. Anyone can take chances.
Sometimes I feel it is.
Honestly, it starts to feel like that, but it's because things are not being done the way they're supposed to legally,
And yet it's a very lucrative business. Arts in South Africa contribute immensely into the country's
GDP.
And yet behind the scene, in fact, we were speaking, of that the amount of music that's created in South Africa with this amapiano waves alone, has turned South Africa into another pot of gold. There is now the scramble for Africa. Everyone wants someone from South Africa to produce a beat for them, because we saw it with this guy, what's his name? Chris Brown. Chris Brown. Came and he's starting to dance on my piano beats, because the trend really. But that shows that there is something our youngsters are doing that's different. These small studios, they do backroom and all that.
The backroom studios are creating
the best beats that you hear. I'm actually touching another kind of web. The best beats that you hear today for the best song
in the backroom studio. I want us to talk about that. Not just the backroom studio. But
No, sorry. Because we're on the amapiano topic. I would like to touch on something that's currently trending right now. Like most of the artists are struggling, especially in that genre, with royalties and getting their money for tracks. Like there was one artist that tweeted that and he's featured on almost every piano song.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can say his name or I should.
I think just say
Did he
it.
publicly
It's
tweet?
in public.
He
It's
publicly tweeted Usa Trill.
Oh yeah.
So
true.
he was like depressed last year, like suffering because he has been on almost every hot track.
Yeah.
But he says he hasn't made a cent.
Yeah.
Not even like 1 rand.
That's what I wanted to also bring up, and it's the issue of publishing and splits.
Yeah.
Which happens a lot in the backroom studios because artists they work with their hearts, as we said.
Yes.
So a lot of the times people will just get together and say, "Come, we're having a session. Let's get in." And it's not just Amapiano; it happens in gospel as well. And I think a lot of gospel artists just don't like to speak out about the issues that they also face.
Yes.
But it's the same issue across the board. Artists work from their hearts. They then get into studio. Hey, we've got a session. Come through. Come drop whatever you can drop.
Pull up. That's
Come,
the
pull
love.
up.
Hey, pull up.
Pull up.
Yo.
Pull up is killing the youth because then you don't get paid, right? So we're going to break it down step by step. Yes.
Then you don't get paid.
We need to discuss this because the first thing was the record labels, and I think we've covered that properly. Now it's publishing and splits. So then you pull up to the studio, you get together, you do a song. None of you know whether it's going to hit or not. You post it on social media.
You wouldn't know it. That's
it starts getting a bit of a buzz. When the song is big, this is now where the artist starts to say, wait, I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to be getting paid for this. Why am I not making money?
Not the artist's friends.
The friends are make sure you're making millions.
The family.
It's the family, right?
Yeah.
Make sure you're making millions now.
Trend.
Yes, and we had a case. I was going to actually bring it up this way that we had. I remember. I don't know if you remember the day I gave you the phone call.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, but Dumisani, I need you right now. We've got a situation. And our situation was similar. And it's not in Amapiano, it's in another genre, but it's with a different client. But I said, these two got into studio based off their own personal relationship.
And most of the time it is based on that.
That's where it starts. We were buddies, we're friends. You're my boy, you're my sister, you're my, whatever. So they get into studio based, I'm on the phone with you, based off their personal relationship. They make a song together. The main artist calls the featured artist. Featured artist is more than happy. Let's get into studio. Let's do it, my brother. Let's write this thing. Gets in. They co-write the song. They then none of this. Managers are not involved. Lawyers are not involved.
Half the time, managers are not involved.
We're not in the studio. We didn't know. We're busy in the office. We don't know you guys are already in studio.
Chemistry in the studio.
They're happy there. They're making songs, and then. On the day the song drops, not even on the day, days after, I think it was a week by the time I called you, I'm like, the song is out, the artist is complaining that they never had any sort of conversation about contracts. I want us to discuss that. They're doing the whole process wrong. Talk me through the correct process of what to do.
Funny enough that, Tanika and I were speaking about that and prior to the recording, and she said something that I had not thought about, and in fact now I'll repeat it each time I do a workshop, but I'm not going to credit Tanya for it.
Oh, come on! This is on camera. Tanya's getting credited.
The problem with, and she kept at it so very well. It says the problem with when artists go to the studio, they let the chemistry flow more than the business. In fact, if you dare talk about the business, you are killing the spark.
You're killing. That's true.
But now when they are in their thing, they are flowing. That's why they can start a recording at 8 in the evening and finish the following day at 8.
The following day, go 10
So and she said something that I didn't actually take heed, and now I do, to say most of the songs that become a hit are the totally unplanned one.
Yes.
Because when you start saying, let's do a feature, I will come next week, and then you don't come, or I will come and then you come and we do a feature. It's too formal.
And let me call my lawyer. Let's draft the feature fee. Let me call my manager. Let's make sure it
dampens the spark. So what the songs that have become a hit, whatever the genre, are the songs that were totally unplanned. And I can speak to that myself from my own personal experience. People don't know this, but when Tukzin, who happens to be one of my clients, and the late Mpura did the remix for Puze. Mpura was passing Tukzin's studio. He was not even scheduled to be in the session. He happened to be passing, And then the session happened, and he got in and he did, and wow, a hit happened. And I could make many other examples. I mean, John Vulligate. I don't know. There's many stories around John Vulligate. I'll focus on the positive one. the artist that ended up doing the hook of the song, in Toshkaz, was not even scheduled to be in the studio. You know, he was actually passing. There's 2 artists that had been booked as featured artists on that song. So there is always, when hits come, and it's not always, but most of the time when hits come, there is that coincidence that and so the first problems become that is unplanned.
It's unplanned, and that's part of the magic of art.
Yeah,
so we understand that.
We understand that, and we're happy with that. Yeah.
We're not fighting with the artists regarding that.
No, be as original and be as spontaneous as possible.
That's the passion. That's the magic of art.
Yes, that's art.
So we agree. Fine, get in the studio because you love one another. You're having a great time.
Exclude us if you like. But as soon as you are done, let's talk splits.
Yes.
Now I wanna go back to your question to say, where do we go wrong? Where is the ball gets dropped?
Yeah.
Now let's say when you go into a studio, whichever way you got it, says Vumelena, what they prefer to be spontaneous and all that. Really, I am and I'm grateful to Tandega for explaining to me which is figanjani problem. It was spontaneous and all that, and they didn't want to spoil, the spark and all that. But the song is not dropped tomorrow.
No.
Because they're still mixing and mastering and all that. So at the very least, no matter how you guys are so passionate to drop, it won't drop tomorrow.
No.
During that time, that gap, those couple of, let's get the paperwork right. And what is the paperwork? I always speak of 4 agreements, not 4 agreements. The first agreement is the publishing split, which is the composition split. Who wrote the song? Who had a contribution in terms of composing the melody, the beat, as well as the lyrics? Who wrote? And people think of splits as some complicated
I think
thing.
it sounds complicated to someone who doesn't know. Yeah.
It's a piece of paper that has a T, literal T. On the one side, you say composer. On the other, you say author, lyricist. So who did the melody? Who did the beat? We write down that Nolu did the beat. We give Nolu 50%. Who wrote the lyrics? It's actually Tandega wrote and Dumisani also wrote, so they share of the remaining 50, they share 25. That's a split sheet. They then write their names, they put their date. The date is very important. They put a date, they put a signature. It's enough. If you take that to a publisher, it's enough to notify the song. If you decide to go to Sambro yourself to notify, that is enough. Even if it's in a piece of paper you tore out of a 2 choir.
Yeah, I've heard that you can literally, as long as you guys are all in that room, you can sit there, take a piece of paper, because sometimes people think, where am I going to get the formal publishing split sheet document?
Yeah. So it's not a form that you have to post.
There are forms.
Dumisani who make it forms because they want to charge.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to be like, when I talk about split sheet, honestly, in workshops, I always say, if I have a wheel, Tandega, I don't know if you have a will,
I do. I'm prepared.
So people think a will is complicated.
Yes.
You need to get a lawyer and time, But a will is basically you speaking before you are unable to speak. So you can take a piece of paper and basically write that I want to be buried upi. I want this and this and this and this and this and this and this, and get people to witness, and they sign and you sign. That thing is not a will written by a lawyer, but it tells us what you wanted to happen the event you die. So it's not as formal and fancy as it looks, but it gets the job done.
Yeah.
A lawyer can work with that piece of paper.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, if you can think of it that way, you will realize that it's not that complicated.
It's not complicated.
You get a piece of paper and you put it down, and now there's cell phones that are smart. They are able to. Then you all take a picture of that thing. You all live with that split. Because if you don't do that, and I'm telling you something that happens every day, the smarter one amongst the room, because there is always a smarter one, wakes up the following day, goes to Samro, he notifies the
Those ones, the ones that say Kimastayaka, they're quietly watching you.
No, they will notify the song.
They notify it themselves.
100%.
Yeah. And to notify, because people don't understand the terms, so I don't want to complicate it. So you say you take your piece of paper, You write it down,
Yes.
studio.
Yes.
You
The
say, okay,
composition
you did
split,
the beats, you
Yeah,
did
you did the lyrics,
we wrote
yeah.
50-50. No, I actually wrote a bit more. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
You have that argument, you laugh about it, you fight
Yeah.
about it, you conclude.
Yeah.
Each sign,
Yes, yes.
you can take a picture of it,
Yeah.
or you take the paper
Yes.
or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
However,
Someone will have the
you know, you
original,
take
yeah,
a yes,
yeah.
and then you on your own can go
Yeah.
and notify. I want
Yeah.
you to describe what
Yes.
that process
Yeah.
is, because sometimes they think I can't go without
we need to
the
go
main
all of
guy.
us,
Yes, or we all need to go together.
And you are very right. When you go to SAMRO, which is the collecting society that manages performance rights in South Africa, you can go alone.
Yeah.
So long as you are able to have the proof that this is what was agreed on, and notify. SAMRO was not there in the studio. They hear you when you say, I have a 15% split on it, and they notify. And here's the funny thing about SAMRO. And you asked me a good question earlier on about cases I've handled. You know, now and again, an artist comes to me and he said, it's my song. I even registered it at SAMRO. There's nothing like registering at SAMRO. SAMRO does not register works. You notify work. Because when you register, you create the impression that you are marking a copyright.
Yes.
And yet, you tell SAMRO that I wrote the song, I have 100%. SAMRO goes with what you say. And that is why SAMRO will wait. If someone else comes, they will call you and say, hey, you say this is your song alone. Here is now someone else. But to avoid that situation, do the split sheet at the studio. When you are all there. But most important, I've never had an opportunity of saying this, and I'm going to say it today. When the song has not become big.
Yes.
Because once the song has become big, I see another Nolu.
Yes, because you're trying to get a slice of my pie.
I see another
I took 100% of this pie. Now you're like, I'm telling 15%.
Yeah. And people that were not there even in the studio, you start to hear that part of the song. And people, I don't know how many arguments I've been in when someone says, he was so lost during the session. There is no way he would have contributed anything. No, he's crazy. He was not even the studio. These people are fighting in front of me in the office. I was not there.
Yeah.
I was not. Definitely at 3 a.m. I will not be a studio in my
Not
age,
at all. But this is why it's also important. You mentioned earlier that when you do that paper, that document, you write the date. Because it does sometimes happen that there was the 3 of us in studio.
Yeah.
But the following week, I took the song with Tandega. You were not there.
Yes.
We then continued to develop the song, and now there's a new version of the song.
Version of that song. Yes. It's actually good. In
with more contribution from other people now, and we need to redo the agreement to say, yes, you were part of the original song.
But
however, we've now developed it further.
Because we are not forced.
So the dates then are important.
Then they are able to, and that helps. If you are able, with these smartphones we have today, if you are able to record yourself practicing that voice that you then added on your own. You know, these phones can record the exact time that you did that rough sketch.
The time, the venue, they write everything.
So, there shouldn't have been disputes about these things.
But we still have them today.
Yes.
I mean, not so every, but most of the big songs that you have had, they have had issues.
Dispute.
It's a question of Omunye, Pesco Munye. Excuse the pun.
Yeah.
Tell it all the time, and you're like saying, no, but you would have thought after so much knowledge about split, people should be knowing this thing.
Yeah.
So, and I want to rush through this thing,
Okay.
So the composition split, I can talk about it until the Lord comes back. I feel so passionate about it, and I feel you hear SAMRO every day saying we have 300 million, we can't distribute. Because people don't have split sheets. People go and do music for the fun of it, and people. And you said something very, very critical at the beginning, and you said when you do the song you don't know it's going to be big. Many artists, when they do this thing, is that vibe of being in the studio. I don't know if you know, but when artists are in the studio, they can record 100 songs a night. There's so many songs, because of these beats that are available on Fruity Loop and all that, and I hear this, half of the time through that artist from Matatiel. He gets a call. I have a beat, come jump on it. So what does that mean? These young kids that are able to create these beats have so many beats on their external hard drive. They are always ready to drop a hit tomorrow. You understand? So they record, when they go to do the studio sessions, they can be there for the longest. You don't know which of this song is going to be a hit.
Yeah.
But you must treat each and every recording as if the song is going to be a hit.
Yeah.
Because if you don't and it becomes a hit, you will be handicapped in now crying if you had not compiled that split. But now, so I'm done with composition split. You must make sure that it's a T, composer this side, writers this side. It must be signed, must be dated, and everyone can notify that song, or they can ask their publisher. But Nolu, do you know there's another split sheet that people don't do and they don't even know about, most of them? Is what we call the master revenue split sheet. Because there is 2 copyrights in a song.
Yeah.
There is a composition copyright, which is the writing and the composition.
Yes.
But there's also the vocal now, the actual, what we call master. Hey, do you own your masters? You know, there was a
Such
trend
a big
it was such a big deal about it. So what does the law say? The law is clear. He that records the song, he that has paid for the recording, whether he records it in his own studio or he gets it done somewhere else, owns the master.
Yeah.
But the same law says you have a reciprocal responsibility to pay revenue, in other words, pay royalties that come. I'm not talking about the composition royalties here. I'm not talking about, and you know, you'll be shocked how many times people confuse this thing. What are you talking about? Because somebody is paying you. No, I'm not talking about that. Somebody is paying me for composition. Capasso is paying me for composition. I'm talking about the fact that you took the master, as you were correctly supposed to. You gave it to Africore, or you gave it to distributing. Now you are getting royalties every 3 months or every month. You are invoicing Electromode for. Where am I there? Because my voice is also there. I'm a feature in that particular song. You featured me. No, but we completed splits at the studio. You were there. I know the splits you are talking about is for some. I'm now talking about the splits now for the master. Because when you take, so what the law says, Nolu, is that as a master owner, you can take it and distribute it with anyone. It's your master. And this is where it becomes interesting. The same law says you are entitled to 100% of the proceeds from the distribution. But the same law says from that 100%, you must then pay what you have agreed with the people whose performance is embedded on the mat. Now, because we don't do master revenue splits, we only do composition. People go to Electromode, they go to Africore, they go to DistroKid actually, because most of them use DistroKid, and they collect 100% of the income without paying the people that featured in the particular agreement. So it's important that over and above the composition copyright, composition splits, you also do master revenue split. And you must not use a wrong language. You know what the wrong language they use? They say a share of the master. You know, there's no share of the master. There's only one owner of the master. The owner of the master is the person that pays for the master. So you don't own any share of the master. I'm thinking of another case now where the use of that language got us into a whole lot of problems. So there is no share of the master. There is the share of the revenue derived from the commercial exploitation of the master. So we must then have a split sheet that looks exactly as the one for composition, but this one is for the master to say the record label, for example, the standard dimension that split will take will say the record label, the owner of the master, master time, takes 50%. Then the producer and all the artists who sing will share the other 50%, including the artist who owns the record label. I don't know if you understand.
Okay.
So let me give you an example.
If it's owned by an artist.
So let me give you an example of an artist that I work with. So there's this record label, it records the music, but the artist owns the record label. So 50% will go to that record label. Then the other 50%, the producer. And that's another problem I hear, Nolu. People say, no, but the producer, we've already taken care of him. We've
already paid.
We've already paid him.
Because I was going to say, there's also that grey line of,
I'm glad you are raising that.
They pay you for, you come into studio, and then they, like, I'm buying this beat, or I'm paying you for producer, I'm paying you a session fee, I'm paying you. So then it gets murky to say, do I still go register? What do I register? Yes, because sometimes they can say, but I paid you, you know?
Let me explain it from the point of view of a composition first. In a composition setup, in the literal English sense, if I say I paid you to produce this thing, it has nothing to do with the fact that I was a composer and therefore someone must pay me. Absolutely nothing to do. You must still put me in the composition splits. I must still get a maximum of 50% of it. And if there is 2 of us that did the beat, we will share that 50%. The fact that you paid me money for producing has nothing to do with that. The only instance, and I must put a caveat to that, the only instance where you will exclude me from a split is when we've done what we call a commissioning. I mean, you will know commissioning from your TV background. There, you've paid me to create the beat.
Yes.
Yeah, you've paid me a fee to create the beat. The beat now belongs to me because there has been an outright. You have assigned it outrightly to me.
Yeah.
That part. But it must be clear that you can't pay me a studio fee as a producer and then you start saying you've bought a beat. No, you are just paying me to produce.
Yes.
And I'll come to that now. So this thing of saying I bought a beat, therefore this boy can't be part of a Samro split, it's just a misnomer.
Yes.
It's like something I hear every day, say if you have stayed with a person for 6 months, you are now a customary law
Yes,
wife.
you must go claim, you must go claim.
It's one of those misnomers that as a lawyer I hear them like, okay, there's nothing.
And also the artists themselves, sometimes that's where it gets murky for them, where they realize later that, no, I was actually supposed to go and register myself at one of the collection bodies. And the reason they feel uncomfortable with it is because, but the person did pay me 5,000 for the day, they did give me something. But at the end of the day, if you composed, if your intellectual property is on that track,
you must make sure
there's certain rights that are yours.
Yes. So the fact that someone paid you, I don't care how much, for producing a song. But the beat came with you, the melody. Unless the person, it's something else where the artist came with the melody, came with the progression of the song and everything, and all you did was just to make sure that the arrangement is fine. But even then, I find it very, very hard to find a situation where the producer has absolutely no hand.
No, because most of the time when that happens, you also split the composition rights.
Because there is something that someone can give you the base of how the song will go, but he will not give you the progression. I said, no, I had to learn this thing the hard way, from the, So one or the other producer is going to be involved.
So it's co-produced by the artist and the producer.
And if the artist did, of course, and it's not rare to find a producer who, apart from the beat and the melody, also wrote melody in the song. What that means is that apart from the 50% for composition, you must also go to the authorship, as well. But having said that, in instances where I've paid you to come and produce the song, then I have a choice when it comes to, and I'm glad you raised this thing because it does cause a confusion. Where you've paid the producer outrightly, he might be there in the composition split, but he might not be there in the master revenue if you have agreed that I don't want royalties as a producer. I just want a once-off fee. So, because producers differ. I know, for example, the late Babu Tsepotsola never wanted that thing of being paid once off to produce. He wanted both. I want the money, because I need money now. But I also want what we call producer points. In other words, a share of the revenue, in the income that will come from the master. Because you might pay me now and the song goes big. I mean, I'm limited to the 100,000 you paid me. And the royalties are actually far more. So I want a bit of both. But it then differs how producers work. You know, if, for example, you are to sign with major record labels like Universal, and they actually have a producer agreement, where they will offer you anything between 4 to 8 or even 10% for producer, depending, on your negotiation and the type of an artist that you work with. So this example that I'm giving you is, we have learned, because artists don't do these things, we have learned of the default position to say, at the very least, 50% must go to the record label, and the other 50% must be shared by a producer, provided he was not paid outrightly for producing, and then the remaining artist. So, the problem, artists don't do that revenue split agreement. If you are lucky, they will do the composition one, and they don't do that one. And as a result, when the song becomes big, and the artist who was featured in the song says, no, but I'm not being paid. They say, no, but Samro is paying you for writing. I'm not talking about writing. I'm talking about the fact that I sang in the song, So the same thing with the producer. Sometimes someone features in a song and is paid an outright fee for featuring. Pay you 100,000, you are a feature. But I always say, let's do an agreement that says we have paid you 100,000 to feature. As a result, I was gaining my royalties.
I think that for me is the biggest takeaway to say, with whichever way you work it,
yes,
you need to have an agreement in place.
Yeah, you do.
Whether you need to decide you're getting a buyout from the beginning, or that you're going to go register according to the split sheets. You have to have an agreement in the beginning to say, okay, here's the song now. It's done. It's not a hit yet. It hasn't even been released. You don't have these conversations at a later stage when the song is a hit, because money is involved now. The money is on the table, and that always makes conversations more difficult. So have that agreement to say, even if you're the label, or you're the producer, or you're the DJ, or you're whoever you are, I'm paying you 100,000 now, Dumisani. This means
feature in this song.
After this meeting, I'm paying you so that you don't then come back and say, I owe you this right and this right and this right of the song. Do you agree? Then you sign it. So that
you waive your right.
You waive your right. So that tomorrow you don't come out saying again, I've been abused by such and such, a DJ, producer, manager, and whatever. But it's all because you never had the right agreements in place. And I know you also own a company that does music consulting. And I think this is exactly why it's important. Because
it's important.
Because people, there's so many moving parts to the music industry business, to the types of contracts you sign, be it publishing, be it management, be it record deals, be it performance, brand deals, and all of that stuff. And we've unfortunately run out of time, but we're going to try wrap it up. And see if Thandeka has any closing questions. We've run out of time. There's so many other things I wanted us to get into, but I think the most biggest takeaway from anyone listening should be that artists need to have a lawyer. Artists need to have music business consultants on their side to explain these things, because it's a lot to do by yourself.
No, it is.
Even if you simplify it into sign it on a piece of paper and hand it in at Samro, there's still so much more you might be missing. Like you're saying, the master, the splits on the master,
splits,
you know.
And the splits are a problem.
So what are your maybe 3 main tips on what we've covered today? I'm going to definitely call you back, because there's so much we haven't covered. But your 3 biggest tips.
The 3 biggest tips are actually the last one that we spoke about. Don't go into a studio and leave that same studio. Maybe go, but don't leave, because Thandeka said you can.
They're going to say pull up, go.
They pull up. But don't leave the studio without ensuring that there is agreement in place to govern how that work is going to be exploited after you have left. So there must be a composition split agreement. That one is a must. That one applies across the board, because there was even if it's a fusion song, there is no one who sings. It's just a melody. They will have to be a composition because someone composed that melody. You know? So have a composition, a publishing split agreement, have a revenue split, and I like the way you said it. Even if I am forfeiting a right to earn on the royalties, let's put
it on paper.
Even if it's what is called a trade deal. Now I'm going more towards that case you called me first about. And what is a trade deal? A trade deal says, let's do a song together. It's my song. Provided that we will also do another song, which is going to be your song. Yes. I'm not going to want royalties in your song or even payment. You are not going to want royalties or even payment. Let's have that agreement. You know why? Because the problem with that is that one song will be big, the other will not be. And you will start wanting money from the one that is big and all that. So let's have a royalties, a split agreement for the royalty, the revenue that comes from the master exploitation. Let's also have a producer agreement if you're a producer. That says whether there was a buyout, whether there was an assignment, or you will earn from royalties, or you were paid once off. Let's know as a producer, where do you fit here? Because you will produce so many good piano songs, but you will not be able to get anything because you never had a producer agreement. You were always told, no, we covered you in the Samro publishing split. And it's not enough, because if there's no agreement that says you were paid money and that was a once off, or you'll be paid from, or even both, you are exposed. But let's also have a featured artist agreement. I don't see that, especially in the genre that I play most in gospel. I must expose them. Like very good clients.
No, but it's very true, because once again, we work on emotions.
You work on emotion. Oh, Tina Bazalwana were even worse. You know, hello, Moyongo into the studio. And the same Moyongo, I was actually when the split agreement.
The Holy Spirit is intelligent.
Very intelligent.
Works on excellence.
Way more than better than AI.
Better than AI. So the Holy Spirit won't tell you, let's get into studio and don't have an agreement.
if there is one agreement, and whenever I get an opportunity to say this, no, this is the one thing I know. So these 4 agreements, the composition split, the master revenue split, the featured artist agreement, as well as the producer agreement. You will see that the featured artist agreement and the producer agreement will split to the split. Will speak to the splits. So whatever you've agreed in the splits will then go into. But agreements alone don't mean anything if the payment of the royalties will not be fair and accountable and transparent. Because at the end of the day, he that owns the master is the one that has the opportunity to take it to a distributor. I can have a featured artist agreement with you, but if the distributor then pays you 100% econeni, and you don't come back to me, the piece of paper means nothing.
Yes, because then am I liable to share my statement with you? And
exactly. In fact, a very good point we are raising, because then the distributor will say, hey, Dumisani, I can't share with you Nolu's statement.
They can't. Legally, they can't. They've got an agreement with me.
So let's find a way of ensuring that there is transparency there. And there's quite other ways that we have ensured that happens. For example, we have ensured that the distributor pays from source. If we are 2 artists, especially if we are 2 big artists, let the distributor pays me my share and pays
your
account
share.
To me. That eliminates, and I don't want to say at least it makes it a bit more transparent. That's what. But as things are happening now, and I always say this, I'm an artist, and my most beloved client, I shock me in the sense that they're always eager to go and play a game whose rules they're not too interested to learn.
Yeah.
We do workshops. I mean, you also do workshops. We do this kind of thing. The information me and you have shared, and I must say, Nolu, this was quite interesting because you also know the industry, ask relevant questions and you compliment me really. And this is quite very useful. But artists, especially those that are broken, that thing they've made it, the broken actually doesn't sound. Those that have made it, let's say that, those that have big songs, they never, most of them don't see the need for all these things they're talking about.
I'll agree with you here. As you said, we do workshops. We travel doing workshops, music workshops all the time. And sometimes artists will say, but we don't know. This information is not readily available. But they're never at the workshops.
No, they
are not anywhere to be found at any workshop. And the information is available.
And I always say, if you are to be that artist that does not want to attend this thing and all, at least do me one favor. One, make sure the person you call a manager
is at the
whether it's
workshop.
a wife or it's your husband or whatever, make sure that person's on top of their game and they understand this thing, because at least you will have the opportunity to be taught this thing in the privacy of your. Now, artists don't want to be exposed that they don't know. But yet, and I always say this thing, artists jump into the field of play and play a game whose rules we don't know.
You don't know.
If you're a soccer player, the first thing you will know is that how do you decide an offside?
When do you offside?
You can play terrible football like my team Kaizer Chiefs at the moment, but you know the rules.
You have
and
to.
You stick to the rules. But in music, people just want to walk into it, and later on, they start crying some of the things. And at the end of the day, it is a very, very, very shrewd business, music business. It is, and if you don't take the trouble to school yourself and know some of these things, you will beg to even ask the correct questions.
Yes.
And once it starts there, honestly, you will work. It pains me, Nolu, every year that we have to contribute to burying artists. Who entertained us through the years, and it pains me a lot, especially because I'm someone that should be assisting in
making sure.
It really pains me, and I think artists need to get to a point where they take full charge of their career and understand these things, and not rely heavily on the other party to be able to, because at the end of the day, and this is what I always tell my client, the talent sits with you. Me and Nolu can be the best advisors possible, but
maybe she can sing better than us. But the reason, you mentioned something very powerful, and I know we're out of time, but we're just going to have to keep going. We're just going to have to keep going, because these are gems that we cannot miss,
The crux of this
It's the crux of the matter, honestly. I love what you're just bringing up now, that a lot of artists die. This is why this conversation is important to have, because artists then go on to die poor. Yes. And there are cases where the artist maybe used to be famous, used to be big, used to work in the industry, and now they haven't worked in 10, 15, 20 years, and they're not making the money. So they don't have an income. That's fair. I get that. It happens in the entertainment industry, because at some point you're not working, so you're not making money, therefore you have no money. But where you're still working at the peak of your career, where you're still in that area of maybe your last hit was 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 4 years ago, you should still be making good money.
Yes.
But the reason they're not making that money and they're not able to bury themselves a lot of the times is because they never took care of the business side of the art.
No, true.
So they're not collecting their monies as they should. They're not getting paid the right percentages, and they've entrusted other people with their careers, where sometimes the people take advantage of that, because at the end of the day, each individual is here to benefit their careers. A manager's trying to make money as a manager. They might love you personally, but it's their job as well, the same way as it's your job. And a lawyer is making money for themselves as a lawyer.
No, they do.
Yes, because we're all working. It's a career. So you as the artist can't then run yourself as a puzzle shop, as we keep saying. You also have to run yourself as a business. You're also here to make money and run yourself as a business and use your talent in the right ways.
And two things though. It boils down to what you said, and it was very powerful. When we said artists are ready to be independent, they need to emulate what happens in a formal record label.
Yeah.
A record label has PR, has legal advice.
Has legal, accounting.
So if you are saying you want to run your own, then you need to bring in those services. You don't need to hire all of us. No, there's a PR expert, no Dumisani and all the other. But at least have those services on a consultancy basis.
Yes.
And you know that you have this. Because you can't say you will compete with a Universal or a Sony, which has all these resources, when you don't want to put them in place, you know.
Can't.
And when you are serious about your career, you will invest in that money. It will cost you money, but it will also get you money. The shortcuts don't work.
They don't work.
No, the shortcuts, all they do is to cause you trouble, because something as simple as a good royalty and accounting system you won't have, and you will fight with your artists, and they will leave you. I know of a record label not very far from where we're sitting here, which had the cream de la creme.
I know.
It still goes to me as one of the best record label, independent record label.
Best independent record label. They came out with some of our best talent
to this day.
To this day.
No one is matching them.
To this day.
And I don't know if anyone will ever do it like they did.
They will.
You know, their artists were, and they invested in raw talent and they turned it into gold.
Yes.
They just missed it in that particular aspect, you know, of saying.
What did they miss? Admin? Royalties?
Admin. So in all those areas, really, when I look at it, in all those areas, really, they did not emulate a record label. Run that thing as if it's just it becomes a one-man, puzzle shop when someone decides this and all that. And you have this artist complain, followed by this one, then they leave one by one. You can't celebrate the demise of a black person.
No.
Never. Because that record label was black excellence.
Yes.
I will say this until the day I stop breathing.
I agree.
That record label was black excellence.
It was.
Only if, in fact, we should look at it as the way how not to do things. Because we sit here and wait. I almost say there was another one that just had the money and was able to sign the big names. And,
the one that crashed and burned quickly. That was trying to compete with the other one.
The other one.
Yes,
The one in Durban.
The one in Durban, KZN. They had money. They signed people, bought them Ferraris. But sometimes it's because it's run by, when you say one-man show, businessmen who see the opportunities in the music industry, who have the money to pay the advances, to put the artist up in an apartment, to get them a car, to take care of all that stuff. I mean, they bought some big artist a Ferrari, I think, at that time.
I was another lawyer at the time.
Where were we? Where were we to charge consultation fees? But then they don't run it like a business, and you're a businessman, so you should run it like a business and hire the right people, or at least have them on a consultation basis. But back to your point,
and I'll tell you what the sad thing about that, the fact that in our days we no longer have as many independent record labels. There's still so many talent.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I mean, you get stopped all the time by young kids who say, "Please sign me. I want to be." Yeah. So there is still, the talent never stopped.
But we're scared now because we've seen so many cases.
No, you're scared. Number one. But number two. So what then happens? We have a void of good independent record labels. Sony can't sign everyone. Universal can't sign. So you need the likes of even in gospel. And one day, me and you should come and just talk gospel.
Yes.
Talk about this thing of people recording other people's songs and call them their songs.
Yes. Especially yes. That's the thing. That's a whole conversation, a whole day just for that.
Gospel is a drama on its own.
Because gospel is a drama on its own.
Take gospel.
Yeah.
Which record labels are there in gospel?
Spirit of Praise, the record
It's not a record label anymore. Spirit of Praise doesn't sign artists anymore.
They don't sign anymore?
No, not anymore. Aubrey doesn't sign any artists. So there were the days
when...
So
we literally do not have...
Big Fish.
Am I missing something?
I don't know.
Big Fish is gone. He's no longer
Bob McCartney tells you that, hey, you know what? Bring me when it comes to monitoring, but I don't have the energy to still run a record label.
Yeah.
So there was a time when we had Sizwe Zako. There was a time when we had Big Fish. There was a time when we had Bula Music. You know, I remember Bula when Bula's artists were coming. You know, Uba Uzuzmoz and used to do it in such a way that he said, "Don't put my artists differently. Put them all at once."
And it used to create
Kolega, Uschaba, Ulundi. They will follow each other just like that because the band is the same. We don't want to dismantle the band. It was
and
so
it was
beautiful.
Incredible. It was beautiful to see.
Now, but it fell apart just like the other record
the other record label.
Just similar. Same way.
And the reasons are similar. But the question then, Tandega, is what do we do with those young kids who still want to sing gospel? They can't all be in joyous celebration.
No.
They can't all be in spirit of praise. In fact, now if you're a gospel artist and you want to be on the spirit stage, you want to be in the joyous stage because you believe one. Then after that, you try and do something independent.
Yeah.
No, I'm tired of seeing the same faces in posters. Where's new talent? People are wowed by Wansi as if Wansi has always been there and as a backing vocalist, and I'm happy for Wansi. My boy is doing very well. But there was a time where we saw raw talent coming from record labels. Because record labels will provide what we call A&R.
Yeah.
They will go and invest in raw talent and grow it, and before we know it, that talent is in a poster. I bet if there is a big gospel event happening, the faces are the same. No offenses to these guys, half of them are my clients anyway. I love them so much. But I would also like to see young, upcoming, new talent.
New talent
so
coming
that we
in.
see, you know, because South Africa is endowed with very good talent. But because of the lack of record labels.
Yeah.
So what is happening now that everyone is his own spaza shop that he's doing. Gone are the days where you'll have a record label that has about 10 artists. That were all invested. This one hands over the mic. You know, I go back to the story of this record label where you knew this one opens for this one. This one is not known, but now is now.
And they did the thing that Bula, you were saying, that record label could have their artists back to back.
And I asked myself to say, how do you pipeline? What happens if my kid, okay, thank God to me is not into music because, you know, but if my daughter to me, for example, was passionate about music, how does she pipeline herself into being the next Rebecca Malop?
She has to, what's happening now is that they do it themselves independently. As you said, everyone is running their own shop now. So each artist then tries to gather some money and record themselves and get into the industry. But I think what I see happening, unfortunately, is that it is killing the element of true artist development by labels. And where you can have artists that...
rendering us useless, me and you, actually.
But at their loss, because at their cost, because then they don't understand the industry. You can't do it without a lawyer and a manager. You are just trying to set yourself up for failure. But what I see missing is just that artist development element of record labels where they used to develop artists from scratch and build you up into a star and like curate you, you know, tell you Zahara Manje, this is going to be your look, this is going to be, you know, from spinach to Zahara, how do you do that, you know? So I think we're missing that in the industry. That's why in the gospel industry you find a lot of artists, a lot of them sound the same, a lot of them look the same because there isn't any individual artist development happening from labels.
In fact, when we come back, now I keep saying when we come back because I know we don't have time. When we come back, we're going to talk about to what extent are the artists that have broken open a way for the ones that are coming?
Perfect place to end it. Tandega, do you have anything to say in closing?
You guys covered everything.
That was beautiful. We just didn't have enough time.
He needs to come back.
The funny thing about this podcast is that we speak about things, you know, you and I speak about these things when we meet.
Every time we just see each other.
Today what we did is we consolidated all this. But wow, thank you so much for inviting me. I had fun. I could talk until the following day because I'm passionate about this thing, as you can see, and really, it's I know how passionate you are about it as well. And I really think there is a lot that we could have gone on, but the important thing, for me, if I have to say one last thing,
your closing statements for today's topic.
Artists need to make a habit of equipping themselves about this industry they play, starting by watching this podcast from the beginning to an end.
From beginning to end, because it's like a free workshop.
And repeating it.
So
they must pay us.
They must pay us. Such an insightful free workshop. Like, where are you going to get this?
The stuff that we spoke about.
Exactly. But I love that you're definitely going to be coming back. I'm going to keep featuring you because
I have to talk about gospel.
We haven't even gotten into the industry we work in. We specialize in our niche, which is gospel. And we're definitely going to get into that. But we did cover record labels, publishing, artist rights, and how important it is for an artist to have a lawyer on speed dial. I have a lawyer and pay them. But don't worry, they're not always too expensive. Sometimes the pay the lawyer makes them feel like you must first make it, be successful, and then you'll be able to afford a lawyer.
The idea is to be able, I contributed into this thing. As I say, I made an example of 166. I'm so proud of him. You know? When I started working with Wansi, he was just a backing vocalist, I think, for Dr. Tumi, a couple of others. And you know, when you see the trajectory going, you're like, look what the Lord is doing in the day of our living, you know. And the good thing about the industry that we work on, Nolumi and I, is that we get to listen and to people who minister to us as well.
Because we are fans.
We're fans.
This is one of the things I wanted to say. The reason we have these conversations is because we are fans of the industry. We grew up and have been molded by it. We love the music. We love the artists. And we just want to help fix what we can. That's our little contribution. Let's try to get things right.
And Tandek actually said it at the beginning. He said, you know what? When we see the order in the other genres, which we don't see here, you're like, why can't these guys
get it right?
Zulu get it right? And then the formalistic. So ukufika nje kugigi akutholi rada yakuphelele. You know. For the next discussion.
That's for a whole other discussion. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me. I can't wait to have you back to discuss more about the entertainment industry as a whole and gospel specifically. The next chat is going to be just about gospel.
Yeah, we're talking just gospel. We're talking about public domain. We're talking about people. We're talking about when can you do someone's song? Is it even wrong to cover someone's song?
Yes.
I can't wait for
Yes, because those are big fights that I had behind the scenes. But thank you guys once again for tuning in. I hope that you didn't skip any part of this conversation because it's a very important and big conversation to have. I hope you've learned a lot about music publishing, music rights. There's so many things we didn't get into just because of time, but we're definitely going to have Mr. Motsamai back here again very, very soon. Now, right this second, while we say goodbye, please subscribe. Click the subscribe button.
Please do.
Like, share, comment, share your thoughts as well. I know we always are reading about some confusing cases where artists are fighting with record labels or managers, and we are not sure who is right, who's wrong in the scenario. Comment below. I'm going to ask Ubab Dumisani to actually be a part of the chat in the comments and answer you guys and share some knowledge with you guys in the comment section. So ask your questions, ask about some interesting cases, and ask for more clarity if you need it. And then hopefully at the end of this year, we'll have an actual physical workshop where we can have you guys with him and some other industry professionals at the same time, in the same room, unpacking the entertainment industry. From me, Nolu Malope, I will see you again very soon. Goodbye and God bless.